Greetings, Ken Woodward here. Welcome back to another episode of Curated Questions. Together, we engage inquisitive humans about how they use questions to navigate and make sense of our world. I am a fellow traveler and pilgrim on this journey, and I'm glad you're here. In 2008, I had a long commute. I left in the dark, and I came home in the dark. The drive was one stretch of the day that belonged to nobody. No client, no kid, no professor, just me and the road and whatever was running underneath. That year was full. The full-time job was demanding. I had a handyman business on the side. I was taking one college class a semester, chipping away at a degree the slow way. The kids were in middle school, which meant a calendar of practices, pickups, and things I did not want to miss. And under all of this, like a noise in the engine, I kept meaning to check, were questions I could not have said aloud. Why isn't this working? Why is the American dream not becoming real for me? This is what I could not see about that car then. Nobody asked me how I was doing in there. But here is the part that took me years to see. I would not have known how to answer. I did not have the room to wonder how I was. I was not avoiding the question. I could not even hear it. There is no time to ask how you are when you are busy being the provider, and the provider was the only version of me that season had room for. I did not know how to step off the merry-go-round. We cannot long for a chair we do not know is empty. I'm telling you this because of a study I read this week, and because of a chair. For 2 years, I walked through Washington, D.C., and I asked strangers questions, more than 1,300 conversations. I was always the one leaning in. I was always the one taking notes. And in all that time, I never once thought to ask what it was like to sit in the other seat, the one being asked. This study sat down in that seat. Today, I want to talk about the question we are waiting for, the one no one has asked us, and what it costs to drive around for years with it sitting, unasked, in the seat right beside us. Let me share with you what these researchers did, because the move they made is the whole reason this matters. Almost everything we know about curiosity studies the person asking. Ask more questions, and people like you more. Ask a good question, and you read a room better. Lean in with interest, and you build trust. I have built a practice on that truth and believe every word of it. But notice who goes missing in all of that. The person being asked. We study the asker, and we forget the asked. We measure the gift, and we never interviewed the one receiving it. A team at New York University's Department of Applied Psychology decided to turn it around and ask the receiver. The study came out earlier this year and was led by Dr. Niobe and Rachel Taffe. They gave 641 college students a written prompt and asked them to answer in their own words. What is the question you most wish someone would ask you? And then a second prompt. Why? They discovered an unreal response number. Almost everyone had an answer ready. More than 97 out of every 100 named a question they were waiting to be asked. Only a small handful said they had none. Sit with that for a second. Nearly every college student they asked was walking around holding a question, hoping someone would think to ask it. That is not only a study finding, that is a description of the human condition. We are all carrying a question we wish someone would ask. Most of us have never said so out loud. Most of us would not even know how to bring it up. So we carry it, quietly, and we hope. Now here's why this study did not feel like news to me. It felt more like a memory. For 2 years, I was the one doing the asking. I walked every street and alley in D.C. wearing a sign, and I stopped and talked with more than 1,300 people. And something happened on those sidewalks that I could never quite explain to myself at the time. People thanked me, hard, out of proportion even. Strangers would tear up over a short conversation with me, just a guy holding a sign. I wrote in my journal back then that I did not know what to do with all the gratitude. I said it felt like I should be pulling people out of burning buildings to deserve that kind of thanks, not just walking a neighborhood and acknowledging the people in it. The study helped me better understand the heartfelt responses. The words and the action demonstrated care. The thing I was handing people was not the sign, it was the chair. I was stopping. I was asking. I was treating them as worth being curious about. And for a lot of folks, that was rare enough to bring tears. The disproportion was not strange. The disproportion was the data. Being asked is that scarce, and that hungered for. So what is it? What did all these people most want to be asked? The researchers sorted the answers into 8 categories. People wanted to be asked about their goals, about their daily life, about what they think of the person in front of them, about what they need. But the most common one, the question named more than any other, was the simplest set of words in the language. How are you, really? I've talked about that question on this podcast already, twice. I talked about it once as a throwaway we murmur in the hallway as we pass each other. I talked about it another time as the question a friend asked me 9 months into the pandemic when he stopped and waited for a real answer. I told him I was fine. I was not fine. How are you, really, is not a new discovery. Previously, I was focused on the question. This study showed me that care matters more than the exact words. The plainest words in the world top the list, and that should tell us something. People are not waiting to be asked something clever. They're waiting to be asked at all. I have a memory that backs this up, and it's so small you could blink and miss it. Near the end of the walk, I passed a woman standing out in front of her row house. I did not have a question for her. I did not have anything profound. I just said, "Good to see you," and kept moving. She stopped me. She said, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." 4 words from me. Good to see you. And it landed on her like something she had been waiting on. I remember being genuinely surprised. I had not done anything. I had said the smallest possible thing a person can say to another person and mean it. And it reached something in her I never saw and will never know. That is the whole study, standing on a sidewalk. The plainest words carried by a little bit of presence, reaching a person who had been waiting to be seen. The words barely matter. What matters is sitting underneath them, and the researchers went looking for the underneath. Because after they asked people what questions they wanted, they asked them why. The why is where this conversation actually lives. The reasons sorted into 6 bins. I want to sort through all 6 with you because every one of them is a door into a person. The first reason, and the most common, was about the relationship itself. People wanted to be asked a question because it would give them a way to say something true about how things stood between them and the other person. A way to name a need without it sounding selfish. A way to bring up something that had been sitting unspoken for a long time. The question was a door they could not open from their own side. They needed someone on the outside to reach for the handle. The second reason was time. People wanted to be asked because the asking might lead to more of it, or to a better kind of it. Less passing in the hall, more sitting down and sharing this most precious resource. The third reason was to feel seen and understood. And this is where the answers start to ache. People described being misread, carrying a version of themselves on the outside that did not match the inside. One person said, The people closest to them saw someone happy and easygoing who could do no wrong. And what they wanted, just once, was for someone to know that that was not the whole story. I met that reason in person, on a porch, before I ever read this study. I'll call her Tanya. It was early in the walk, a hot July day, and I was wrung out and heading for the car. She called me over from across the street. She had seen me come and go through the neighborhood all day. She wanted a picture. So I crossed over, tired, and I told her what I was doing and why. And she started to cry. Not sad crying, the other kind. She gave me a hug, and she told me how much it meant. And she stood there on her own porch with tears running down over a stranger and a sign. I did not know her story. I still do not. All I had done was stop and see her and tell her the truth about why I was there. That was the whole transaction, and it was enough to move her to tears. I used to file Tanya under "people were kind to me on the walk." This study refiled her. Tanya was reason number 3. She was a person who wanted to be seen, and for a few minutes on a hot summer afternoon, she was. And this interaction was between strangers when we first met. The 4th reason was close to hers: to feel cared for, not informed, cared for. People wanted the question because the question itself was the proof. If you ask me how I am, and you mean it, then I know I am on your mind. The asking is the caring made audible. You cannot fake your way into it, and you cannot get it any other way. The 5th reason is the one I wasn't prepared for. Some people wanted to be asked a question not so that they could receive anything, but so that they could finally give. They were holding love they had not found a way to say, appreciation, gratitude, words they wanted to tell a parent, a friend, a partner, and could not get out on their own. They were waiting for a question to give them permission, to open a door they could walk through. Think about what that means. There are people in your life right now holding something kind they want to say to you, waiting for you to ask the question that lets them say it. The gift sits on both sides of that question. The asker gives the opening. The one asked gives the thing they have been carrying all along. The 6th reason was to grow. People wanted to be asked because saying a thing out loud to someone who is truly listening is how you come to understand it. The question turns the lock, and you hear your own answer for the first time. 6 reasons. Now notice what is almost entirely missing from all 6. Information. Nobody on that list wanted a question so they could hand over a fact. They wanted to be known. They wanted to be cared for. They wanted permission to love out loud. They wanted company in something heavy. They wanted to hear themselves think. The question was never a request for data. It was an invitation to be known. I handed out that invitation more than 1,300 times, and I watched what came back through the open door. It was almost never information either. It was the bottled up thing, the held grief, the thing that had been waiting for someone to ask. And there was a second thing that came back, one that I'm slower to admit. The person was almost never who I had decided they were. I would see someone from down the block and quietly size them up. Not much to say, I would think. Nothing here for me. My own notebook is full of the same confession, written over and over. My judgment was wrong again. I would ask anyway, and the person would open, and the picture I had built of them fell apart in the first few minutes. The study has a careful phrase for this. It says a real question can end up violating the assumptions we hold about a person. The sidewalk version is plainer. I was wrong about people for 2 years straight, and asking was the only thing that ever corrected me. There was a line in the study I cannot shake. A college student said they were wearing themselves out trying to keep a dead parent's memory alive, and all they wanted was for someone to care enough to ask about him. Nobody had, so they carried it alone. I know that ache. I know it from the inside, because I have a buddy. I met Buddy Harrison early in the walk. He started talking to me from his second floor window, then came down to the street because a conversation through a window was never going to be enough for a man like Buddy. He was a devout Catholic, and he had taken everything that faith asked of him and turned it into things you could touch. Across from his place, he had built a free food pantry. He called it Food Buddy. One was not enough for him either. He was planning 9 more, spread across the city. He ran a boxing gym for neighborhood kids to give them somewhere to put their fire that was not on the street. He had taught his own son to box, and the boy who was now a man was winning fights. Buddy walked me up into his home so his wife could record an interview because he wanted the project remembered. He spent his days giving away the exact thing nobody had ever handed him. A while after the walk ended, Buddy was murdered on his own front porch. I'm not going to dress that up. It's the kind of loss that does not resolve, and I will not tie a bow on it. But here's what the study taught me to see about it. For a long time, I carried Buddy the way that college student carried their father, quietly, in my own chest, where it was safe and where it was also very heavy. And nobody knew to ask me about him. What I understand now is that I had it backward. The way you keep a man like Buddy alive is not by holding him tighter and more alone. It's quite the opposite. You say his name. So let me say it here out loud on this podcast to a few thousand people who never met him. There was a man named Buddy Harrison who came home and filled a field with food and taught kids to keep their hands up. I had been waiting for someone to ask me about Buddy, but what took me too long to learn is that I was allowed to hand them the question myself. Ask me about my friend Buddy. Let me tell you what he built. That is the 5th reason: lived. We do not only want to be asked so we can be seen. Sometimes we want to be asked so we can give our dead back to the world for a minute, so we can set the weight down by sharing it. Some doors only open from the other side, and the question is one of them. On the far side of it is someone we loved, waiting to be spoken about again. Nobody can ask that question for us, but anybody can ask it. And if no one does, we do not have to keep waiting in silence. We can hand it over ourselves. I have spent whole episodes celebrating the hard question, the complex one, the one with real architecture, the foundation-shaking kind that can rearrange a life. I walked you through the anatomy of a question with Heidegger. I believe in the difficult question. I have built a methodology on it. And now here comes a study telling me the most wanted question on the planet is, how are you, really? A woman on the sidewalk undone by a good to see you. So which is it? Is the great question the complex one or the simple one? I think that the best answer is that those are 2 different measurements. I build a whole practice on the architecture of a question, the subject, the source, the intent. And it's easy to forget the simplest part of it, the person standing there holding it. Complexity is about the shape of a question. Care is about the spirit behind it. They're different axes. A question can be plain in its shape and bottomless in what it opens, if it is carried by real presence. And a question can be dazzling in its construction and open absolutely nothing, if there is nobody home behind it. How are you really is not a simple question. It is a plain question. There is a difference, and the difference is everything. Plain on the outside, bottomless on the inside, if you mean it. The complexity did not vanish from the great question. It moved out of the words and into the asker. Let me take you back to the commute because I left something out. Nobody asked me how I was in that car, but I told you I was not asking it either. That's not quite true. I was asking a question in that car every single day, and I just had the wrong one. The question I drove around with was, why am I failing at the American dream? Listen to what that quietly assumes. The dream is sound. The machine works. I am the broken part. A question built like that can only produce one kind of answer. Try harder. Add another side job. Drive a little further before dark. The question I could not yet reach was the real one. What if the dream itself is the thing to question? What if the machine was never built for everyone it made promises to? I had no room for, how am I, really? And no room for, is any of this even true? Same silence, same overloaded man, two questions, both out of reach. And here's the part worth saying plainly. 2008 was not just a year my dream stopped paying out. It was the year the whole thing cracked for a lot of people at once. I felt it as a private failure, a verdict handed down on me alone. But I was on a highway full of people feeling the exact same private failure. Each of us sealed in our own car, none of us able to ask the bigger question. Because that question takes too much space for the season we were living in. It took me years and 2,000 miles on foot to ask both. How am I really? And is the thing I built my life around even true? The walk is where I turned around in the seat. The people I met there, the Tanyas and the buddies, taught me how. For the last year, I've been wrestling with one particular question. Longtime listeners know it by heart. What question are you avoiding that would change everything? That question assumes you can already see the thing well enough to dodge it. It is about the question you are running from. The study handed me its mirror because there's another question living underneath that one. Not the question you're avoiding, the question you are awaiting. The one you are quietly hoping someone will finally bring to you. The avoided question and the awaited question. Same person, two sides of one ache. I've come to believe that these are two pillars of the same practice. One asks what we will not face. The other asks, what are we longing to be handed? And I needed the second one. The man in the 2008 car was not mostly avoiding his question. He was awaiting it. No one came. And eventually, he lost the ability to feel that anyone was missing. So I did something this week. I added a question to the website. I put a version of it on the meditation page, the friendship page, and the relationship page. On the meditation page, it points inward for the person sitting alone with it. What question are you waiting for someone to ask you? On the friendship page and the relationship page, it points outward into a real conversation. What question would you like me to ask you? I did not plan the next part, but it's true, so I will name it. The study found that the questions people want depend on the relationship. What they wanted from a parent was not what they wanted from a friend, which was not what they wanted from a partner. The longing changes shape depending on who is sitting across from you. By placing the question across those 3 pages, my own site ended up mirroring the very thing the research found. I built the architecture of the study into my own practice as I learned of it. And I will tell you the cost of not asking, because I paid it myself. A friend stopped me outside the office once and asked me how I was, and he meant it, and he waited. He handed me the exact opening this whole study is about. I gave it back to him unused. I lied. I said I was fine. That was the day I learned what it costs to decline the question you have been waiting for, and on the one occasion somebody finally brings it. As we move towards the close of our time together, there are 2 things I want to leave with us, and they are both questions, which feels about right. The first is for the people in our lives. Somebody close to us is holding a question right now, waiting for us to ask it. Maybe they want to be seen, like Tanya on her porch. Maybe they're carrying someone they lost, the way I carry Buddy, and they're waiting for a chance to say that person's name out loud. Maybe they just need to hear "good to see you" and have it meant. We do not have to guess which one. We can be the one who reaches for the handle from the outside. The words can be plain. How are you? Really? What do you need? What have I never asked you that you would like me to? The plainness is not the problem. The asking is the whole gift. The second question is for us. What question are we waiting for? What is the thing we are quietly hoping someone will finally think to ask? Most of us have never let ourselves name it. We are standing at our own door, holding the handle, waiting for someone to reach for the other side. We do not have to wait for that. We can say it. We can hand the people who love us the very question we have been waiting for them to ask. That's not weakness. That is how the empty chair gets filled. I spent a year in a car with a question I could not hear. And I spent 2 years on foot asking everyone but myself, and being thanked so hard for such a small thing that the walk taught me how starved people are to be asked. I do not want that silence for us. The merry-go-round is real, and the seasons are real, and some of us cannot step off today. I understand that all too well, but we can still do the small thing. We can ask one person one real question this week, and we can let one person ask us. So here's mine for you before you go. Picture it. By now, our ears have adjusted to the coffee shop murmur. Only crumbs remain on the pastry plate, and the coffee cups are half full. What question would you like me to ask you? I'll be listening for the answer. Keep questioning.